freed from this realm. You have to help him, Isla urged Rook and the others onward. My friend, Faust, he fell somewhere near here. Here, Isla. I'm over here, an agonized voice croaked from only a few feet away. Rook hurried over, dropping to his knees beside the fallen man. Flesh had been torn in jagged gashes, and Rook could see some of Faust's intestines poking through the wounds. Strange grays and browns that meant that the abdominal wall had been broken. This is bad. Here, Zeke was nearby, offering Rook a first aid kit. His voice sounded strained. Do what you can. Please, you have to save him. Isla sat very close, holding one of Faust's hands in both of hers, never looking away despite his terrible injuries. Rook tried to tune out the conversation. He needed every drop of concentration he could to have any chance of saving this man. Suri floated just beside the girl they'd saved, sounding angry. This is why the Great Bounty divides our world, sister. Horrors like this would never transpire if we left humans to their realm and didn't try to stay. Nightingale spoke from close by. What are you talking about, Suri? Rook did his best to put everything back where it belonged, but if any of the guts had been cut open, he wouldn't have the skill to sew them back up. Even if Faust lived long enough to get to hide, he needs some serious treatment. She has a soul bond with this mortal. With his help, she can remain on Madar as long as she wants and avoid detection from the Great Bounty. Do you mean that she can actually stay in physical form? Nightingale asked, imagining Suri adventuring with them. Yes, Suri explained. Then she spun on Isla. But what good is the protection he's giving you if you throw it away and do something stupid enough to summon the bounty yourself? You see what that living oblation did to Faust, Isla exclaimed. I couldn't live with myself if... She looked away from them, back down at the man on his back in agony. What happens to me doesn't matter. You have to save him. Rook gently nudged one of Isla's hands out of the way so he could keep working on Faust. He had already cleaned the wound as best he could, and was beginning to stitch it closed. It was the best he could do. Nightingale couldn't help but notice the resemblance between Suri and Isla. They both were obviously from the same place. She wanted to ask, but thought better of it as they continued to argue. Then you should have stayed away from him, Suri lectured. You aren't the only one who wishes to have a stronger connection to Madara, but the bounty exists for a reason. Now your lover will die. You'll be caught, and it will have done no good. Rook's eyes widened, and he looked to Isla. You're from Arcala too, aren't you? How can you be here? Faust isn't wearing a pendant. Rook lifted the artifact around his neck. This is what allows Suri to appear. How did you get here physically? Even with this pendant, Suri can only appear as a hologram. Hologram? Suri shook her head, not understanding the word. However, Suri was used to a myriad of strange words the group used, so she began to explain before Isla could answer the question. It's called a soul bond. The process relies on a connection with a human to shield the outsider from detection and stabilize the presence in your world. A soul bond with someone from my world is forbidden. So you could actually come to this world? You could stay here permanently? Rook asked, sounding a bit happier about it than he should have. No, this is what happens when creatures from our realms mingle. Suri pointed at the two. This stupid girl endangered the one she loved out of his selfishness. If she's lucky, it won't get them both killed. So this soul bond, can it be used to summon creatures from dimensions other than Arcala and be safe? Zeke was frowning at a bent cigarette. Suri whisked around quickly. Yes, the Great Bounty exists to enforce the contracts made between two creatures. Only a few realms are off limits entirely. Arcala is one of those realms. You could summon a creature from anywhere else and the soul bond could be done in relative safety. However, I'm from Suri froze, her eyes jerking quickly to a particularly dark patch of sky, only partially concealed in the trees. They're coming, she said with a trembling voice. Huh? Zeke asked, his voice coming from behind Rook. Agents of the Great Bounty! Don't fight them. They're only doing their duty. Suri's voice was grim, and her light vanished quicker than he'd ever seen. Guys? Remy called, pointing at the fallen body of the living oblation they'd beaten. Her body had begun to twitch and spasm, eyes opening again. Apparently, she hadn't been as dead as she seemed. It looked like something inside was trying to drag her broken body away. Thunder roared above them in a tumultuous explosion that opened the sky in a massive crack. The earth shook, and Rook dropped his needle, momentarily disoriented. Something emerged from the crack in the sky, a massive shape that filled the air in front of them and loomed over Rook like a vengeful god. "You have done well," the monstrous creature boomed, its voice as deep and resonant as crashing waves and grinding stone. The creature stood at nearly 3 stories tall. "It seems you've captured 2 intruders at the same time." The creature glanced from the living ablation's squirming body to Isla. She quivered under the creature's gaze, afraid of what was to come. "That's 2 bounties to pay for." The creature looked like a giant with the head of a lion, flying on 2 massive feathered wings. It was an amalgam of 2 animals that should have never been, like a monster from the Book of Revelations. Zeke spoke in a whisper from Rook's left side. "Suri said we should cooperate." "No," Nightingale said defiantly. "What will happen to her if they take her?" Isla didn't take her eyes off Faust when she spoke. "They'll take me to Eliud. I'll be judged and sentenced according to my transgressions. I'll probably be better off than her, though." Isla pointed at the living ablation who was slowly trying to get away. The great lion beast reached out for the still-twitching living ablation, wrapping its claws around her. The girl screamed as the creature peeled her open in a spectacular moment of gore. Nightingale gasped and turned to look away, one hand covering her mouth. Inside of the girl's body, something shot out into the air like a black ooze. It came out and made a screeching noise as it was snatched out of the sky by the gigantic lion. It reminded her of the Malama, and Nightingale realized in horror that the black ooze was the real creature they had been fighting, the real thing that had taken over the living ablation's body. The creature pointed a terrible claw towards Isla. "It's time," it rumbled. "Relinquish the lawbreaker and receive your reward." Nightingale jumped in fear, and she had the sudden image of the creature tearing into her own body like a can of food, looking for the Malama that hid inside. "Oh, God!" Nightingale stepped back, putting a hand on Rook's back. Rook grunted, rising to his feet and drawing his weapon. "We should protect Isla, but we don't have much time. Faust is going to bleed to death if we don't get him to a real doctor." "No," Isla clutched tighter at Faust's hand. "I can't let that happen. Let them take me. Just save Faust." Zeke nodded slowly. "I think she's right, guys. Not to be an anti-hero or anything, but I'm thinking this is out of our league." Remy interjected. "We can't just let that thing take her. Look what it just did to the living ablation. It'll kill her." Nightingale was confused. She wanted to be brave, to step up and agree with Remy, but she couldn't shake the feeling of dread, the feeling of the Malama inside of her quaking in the dark recesses of her mind. It was urging her to run, and she agreed with it. Instead, Nightingale just made a squeaking sound and turned to look at Rook for guidance. Rook wiped his hands of Faust's blood and looked back at her. "Princess?" Rook looked towards Nightingale. "Your call."